Hey, Midlifers. Today I want to introduce you to Cheryl Whitelaw. She is a Move More Without Regrets coach and teacher and CEO of Peace and Power Movement Services. She supports her clients to learn through their movement through body-based coaching, mindful movement classes, and hands-on work to support functional movement. Her clients share a desire to live with vitality, to keep going as they age, and often are recovering from operations or injuries, trauma, or live with life-changing conditions like MS, fibromyalgia, or brain injuries. She found true joy in movement when she started training Aikido at age 46, and now she's preparing for her black belt test. Stepping into the Aikido, I knew I was going to mispronounce that. Yes. Stepping into the Aikido mat was a step into her life path. As a child, she asked, if we can make war, how can we make peace? Aikido was an answer to her innocent question and has led Cheryl to offer embodied inclusion workshops to support people to use their body's living intelligence as an ally for change and challenges. She feels in today's world, peace needs to be more than flabby and flimsy. She supports people and causes that integrate peace and power. Her special talent is supporting people to find what is possible for them as a practice of moving into wellness and wholeness. She is committed to supporting people to age well and find their own whole body, mind intelligence. Oh, so much I want to dive into, Cheryl. But first, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. It's great to be here.
So before I dive into your intro, because there's so many things I want to learn about you, we right now are in the series that I'm calling Reclaiming Midlife. I'm seeing that this time of our life is a way to unlearn a lot of rules. And so I thought you would be a great person to talk to about relearning what wellness looks like, relearning what fitness looks like. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great opportunity to chat about something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So I want to, like I said, I was reading your introduction. I was like, ooh, I want to learn this. So I want to know, what was it that inspired you to take up Aikido at 46? We're just going to jump right in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's, my favorite topic, and we could talk the rest of the time, and we won't. But I really starts, I grew up in a community that had been the site of Japanese Canadians who had been moved from the West Coast during World War II and kept in camps and in internment camps. And the wisdom of the city leaders and the cultural leaders at the time, in the late 60s, they made a peace garden. So there was a lovely Japanese garden established fairly close to the actual site of the internment camps as a way to acknowledge the wrongs of that war and acknowledge the desire to live in peace. Mm-hmm. So I had a very early cultural influence of Japanese culture and Japanese martial arts as a child. With when you're a child, it's just there, right? It's just in the environment. You don't think about it too much. And so I really wanted to train Aikido when I was younger, and it just wasn't available. And so I actually ended up training with a lovely karate teacher in my 20s. But when I moved away from that city, I just wasn't able to, he really was a special individual who had the heart and soul of the art and no ego, right? He just was present with it. And so that was really inspiring. But I moved for work. And after 3 or 4 fairly macho experiences, a little bit of misogyny going on.
Just a tiny bit, I'm guessing.
Just a tiny bit. I kind of let that go and had that unfulfilled desire to train Aikido because it's many things at once. It's a philosophy. It's a terribly good workout, but it's fundamentally about connection with another person and working through direct contact and challenge, but to a harmonious conclusion, not to a harmful conclusion. So it was a really good fit for me. And it really was a friend who seemed to have functioned. She reached out to me out of the blue and said, we should go to an Aikido class. And I had just turned 46, so a few days after my birthday. So we went. It's the last time literally I've seen her. She sort of faded from my life. So it literally was, I guess her function was to say, hey, let's go. And so she wanted to go to a school that had a real supportive lineage, so that you knew as you progressed, you could really be supported. And really the only school in town that really offered that was the one that we went to and the one that I train with at today, Abundant Peace. And I can't say that I was good at it at all at the beginning. I was good at working out in the gym and doing kind of conventional fitness. So rolling and so just all the coordination. I didn't realize that my left side literally took twice as long to learn everything as my right. And so it was a real journey of discovering myself. But there was a feeling in the dojo, which is the name of the club where we train, and a feeling about the teacher that I had really only felt with my karate teacher in my 20s, a sort of presence and just really an energy in the space. And so I kind of was hooked. And even though I remember one month, I think it was August, I had started in February, literally everything that could hurt on my body hurt. And I thought, I might have to give this up because I don't think I can go another day feeling this. Like I didn't know all the places that could hurt my body, but it really was part of a conditioning and I believe a releasing of a whole bunch of layers of hidden tension that I just had to go through that stage. But despite not being, like working hard at coordination and various things, I felt a joy in training. Like I've never felt that alive doing anything. And I've done a few things. I like to be active. I like to, kayak and bicycle and lots of things. But there's a joy for me in Aikido that is unreasonable. Because especially at the beginning, I was not, I wasn't pretty to look at while I was doing it. It didn't feel great, but I felt great within. It was just like my soul sort of burst forth. Yeah.
Wow, that's really inspiring. I don't know anything about, I don't know if that's considered a martial art or so I have no idea. Let's just say that. But just to be able to recognize the joy that you feel in trying something. And it sounds like even though there was pain coming up for you, it wasn't out of punishment. It was just out of training.
Yeah. I knew when I did karate, even though I was much younger, I was in my 20s, there's the intensity of the work and the focus, like it really is training. So I knew there had to be a conditioning period. And so how I honored my 46-year-old self was to allow 6 months of twice a week to just let my body get used to it. But one of the biggest conditioning hurdles I had was there's a lot of rolling. It's part of what makes Aikido fluid and beautiful is that rather than the person who does the technique winning over them, the partner who's attacked will then retreat from the space at a chosen time. So often it means a roll or kind of falling to the ground in a controlled way. And my inner ear didn't like that at all. So I was dizzy and disoriented for months and months.
Oh, goodness.
As that whole vestibular, inner ear apparatus adjusted to being, as I say, ass over tea kettle,
right?
As you go rolling backwards and forwards and all sorts of things. Yeah.
So what was it? So you're in pain, let's be honest, and you're dizzy and yet you still feel this call to continue.
Yeah, I have deep respect for my teacher. The Japanese term is sensei. He imbues a lot of the principles within himself of Aikido. And so he's always trying to teach us what he feels as he does it. And so the feelings that came strong and early were like a really visceral vitality. Like if you think about, often this happens on vacation, right? On your best day, if you've gone someplace you love, if it's the beach or whatever, and you get up and you have the prospect of doing exactly what you want to do in beautiful landscapes, and you just feel like that where you are filled you up with its energy. That's for me what it's like stepping on the dojo mat every time, is that all of that aliveness, it's like this current of essential vitality. Just, it's like someone strokes that string and it vibrates. So it is energetic, but it's absolutely within the body. It's not a kind of energetic state that is away from the body. I had tried various meditation traditions and other sorts of traditions, but they tended to kind of park the body in a pose or seated. And there's a different kind of living vitality, I find, in the experience with the movement and the connection with another person.
Right. It almost, I'm getting this, I'm sure I have seen Aikido, but I'm getting this sense it's almost like a dance, like more than a combat. Does that feel true?
Yeah. Well, and it's, you sort of touched on a controversy. People in martial arts whose purpose is to fight would argue Aikido is barely a martial art. And it definitely has traditions and schools that I would say focus primarily on the spiritual development. And I think it does become very much like a dance. What's a harder path, I think, and I'm quite sure my teacher is walking it, is how to stay what we would say martially viable, so that what I'm doing, if I follow through, if I carried out this intent in the fullest expression, would bring force. So you would be able to control an attacker and take care of it. But that you're doing that from this internal sense of calmness, clarity, expansion, and there's no malice, there's no intent to destroy in that controlling, like in that expression of force. It's a force with someone. It's not a force over someone. And I've really learned to appreciate, as I've brought Aikido increasingly into some of my coaching and facilitation work, the difference between those two little words. That intent to exercise power on someone absolutely brings a win-lose, a me and them kind of mentality in this exercising power with, it's an us, it's a we, in sometimes in a really, I always say I was perilously close to actually doing Aikido at this time, because it's a long road of training and trying, when you really unify with your opponent and there is no other, and you're a system together in movement. And so in that sense, I agree, it feels like a really good tango dance, or where there's that connection and presence with each other.
Ooh, gave me goosebumps just listening to you. For one, we are able to see each other, but I always love when I can see someone's face really reflect the words that they are saying. And so I just see a glow, such a respect and a glow. And like you're smiling now, and it's, wow, I can just feel it. So, ooh, yeah. We just kind of jumped into this, but was this the beginning of basically you taking this idea of connection within your body and going forward, and this becoming your life's calling and going into coaching? And tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there was a few steps along the way. I did do in my late 20s a master's degree in education looking at transformational learning, but with a very unconventional teacher, or a very unconventional professor. And she really turned me towards an embodied sense of learning and knowing, which is still pretty atypical in an academic setting, which is a very heady cognitive place. Yeah, the Aikido practice, when I started, I didn't really have any intention of making it a life path. I just knew I loved it. But I was working in a diversity and inclusion field, and with a very particular focus about communicating well across both similarities and differences. and focused on, in the Canadian workplace, we do have a high level of immigration, and it's a value, we value it in Canada generally, and how to make that work better to really leverage the value of the differences reflected there. And so that was increasingly where I started to see the helpfulness of having this sort of settled, centered, grounded core of myself to go into those discussions where the differences start to really matter. And it may be conflict, but even if it's not, how do you come to agreement and work together when there's radically different views about all the things that should happen, right? The things that people know. And I will admit that when President Trump was elected, I was working in a 2-year college with a high degree of diversity. So we had students from about 120 countries of origin, a lot of Indigenous and Inuit Northern folks. And for the first time, there's always a bit of tension when you've got that much diversity going on. The very devout Muslim women don't want to be touched by the assist guide dog with the person with seeing, needing support in terms of seeing. But it was the first year that we had physical violence on the campus between students. In the way, there would be small incidents, but it increasingly became clear to me that if we're doing a lot of this basically communications work, how do you communicate better when someone doesn't just think like you do and look like you do, that it wasn't enough, that the body was still missing, because as soon as people feel threatened, they kind of get that limbic hijack, and their problem solving ability, literally, we kind of get dumped into the basement of our brain, and we can't access those higher cognitive functions. And so I realized that the clock was running out for me in terms of continuing the work I was doing and, needing to do something. And as the universe can be really generous, I had an opportunity to go train with Dr. Paul Linden at the Columbus Center for Movement Studies. And he's a unique individual on the planet, but he had managed to partner Aikido work with something called Feldenkrais. So another strange label. It's a learning modality that uses movement as a kind of positive neuroplasticity. And so he wedded those two things together to work with people to recover from trauma in a way that I had never seen before. It wasn't talk therapy. He worked with them to regulate themselves physically. He worked with them to differentiate thoughts and body emotions as a body event so that they could come back to associate with themselves. And then he resourced them to win their trauma. So if that was a rape victim, he would resource them to win from the attacker. Or if that was a child who had experienced abuse, he would resource them to be able to stand up and speak out. And so it was a whole other view of, oh, wow, this work could be used in a fundamentally different way than I'd considered. And so those sort of really steered me to the path that I am now, which is working body first with people, even though I do coaching with people on topics that you wouldn't think were a body-based topic, that we use the body as their home base, as their ally to support them, because often some of the issues come from a fundamental living away from yourself, some kind of disassociation. And so it is literally a remembering, bringing together into self, body, mind, heart, and I would say spirit, in however you define that.
Yeah. I have a theory that many women, especially women in our age group, have really disassociated themselves from their bodies for many reasons. And so to bring those two together somatically, if you hear the term somatic coaching, listeners, then it's body-based coaching, and just how important that is, because our body tells us so many things that often we have forgotten to listen to. Yeah. So even when you get that sense of, ooh, that person's creepy and I want to stay away from them, that's your body telling you. So that's That's an example that I like to use, and so much. And I love that there's so many more. I'm getting off topic here, but there's so many more studies now about just the gut now being looked at as being another information source that's going to our bodies. So I kind of geek out over that kind of stuff.
No, it's completely true. Like often the word people use is intuition, and I sort of, I'm cool with that word, but it's again, it's a cognitive label for something that I think is in fact much bigger. And it's, that sense of how do I perceive the space around me, not just how far is something away, what my personal space is. And when someone comes into that, I mean, if I could, when I see sort of self-defense courses for women, and they're always focused on sort of the moves, right? This is how someone grabs you and you release yourself or whatever. If I would teach one thing, I would teach women to be aware of their space, not just with their eyes, but to viscerally feel what's around them at all times. And there's both through the Feldenkrais and the Aikido traditions, there's study that has you develop that sense. And it really is it's from the belly more than your other senses, that you can tell when someone's in your space. And even when they're behind you, even when your eyes are closed, and even sometimes what color they're wearing. Like I've had these sort of impressions come, and when I've checked them out, they're accurate. They're accurate enough for the purposes of who's in my space and where am I and am I safe?
Right. Yeah.
And so, it's like our own early warning system.
Yeah. Very important. Yeah. Very important. Yeah. We could. It's probably, we could go way down that rabbit hole, which I can tell you like it too. So we'll have you back and talk about that too.
Okay. Yeah. So good.
I'm thinking about as women in air quotes midlife. And I know that over email, you and I were joking about how we often have this vision in our head of fitness as being Olivia Newton-John and singing "Let's Get Physical" and in her tights and leg warmers and hand raised. Yep, that was me too. Yeah. I was thinking of that this morning because I had flashes of my leotards and like my favorite ones. And there was a lot of jiggling going on, even though I didn't have much to jiggle back then. And
neon, lots of neon.
Lots of neon. Yeah, lots of neon. And it was sort of like, are we doing this to be fit? Or are we doing this to look good? Come on. Right. Yeah. But I find it interesting that even as I'll be 56 this year, but so a lot of time has passed between now and then, but I still have this vision, whatever, of what fitness is supposed to look like at my age. And it keeps me from doing it. If that makes any sense. I hate to admit that, but yeah, it's just that we have a different version. And I think it's time to start relearning what fitness means for us. And I'm wondering what your take is on all of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'll start by saying what I find is super important and something that we learn, but in a very kind of contorted, constrained way, is to listen to our bodies. And so what I mean by a contorted way, we tend to listen to what really hurts, and that's it, right? So when we've reached some kind of 5-alarm, okay, you need to like put something on that or take a pill or whatever. We're good at listening that way, but then we don't listen the rest of the time. And I'm really finding as I work with clients that the body is crazy adaptable, resourceful when we think about the full brain-body connection. And so I know it's anthropomizing, like putting a personality where there is none, but as the body almost says, okay, if you're only going to listen when I hurt, you gotcha. Like I'm gonna hurt until you pay attention. And so it's really interesting to work with people that if you're kind of underactive, like used to be, but I can't do that anymore, Or I often find with some of my clients, there's like a major shame thread way, that even if I'm walking around the block, I'm basically also walking and flogging myself inside for not doing more, for not doing better, some kind of emotional tone that just like literally is a little cloud going with you as you do the thing you're doing. So it's not that enjoyable, right? Because you're mostly confronting what feels like your own limitations or failures as you do the thing supposedly for your health and wellness. So really hard to be successful that way. I then find the people that they're the runners, or they play a lot of women in soccer where around by, so they play and then they like catastrophically break an ankle or something. And then there's pins, and then they can never quite get back to it, nor can they find something that they love as much as the thing they did for 25 years or 30 years. Right. So the activity goes down. And so the problem with even the runners, they run themselves into Achilles tendon issues or plantar fasciitis or knee issues or whatever. And they're not very adaptable, right? Like, but I got to get my 10K and I've got to get, like whatever the meaning is. And so I've really been trying to work with people to understand there's this adaptable activity that's really important, that for sure you want to have goals. Like we do need to be sort of growing or expanding into we want, because otherwise we're sort of diminishing and contracting. But listening to yourself as you do it and allowing, like one of the things I've been working through, because I am training towards my black belt, and I'm 54, and so it's not how it was when I was 34. So I do have to work with recovery periods and whatnot. But in doing just some squatting work, just for leg strength and flexibility, the first 5 minutes is pretty slow and pretty gradual, because I do have to warm up everything. And if I allow that, then I have a great session with that stretching. But if I jump in and try to get my sit bones down to my heels, I could really be in trouble for the next 3 to 4 days, Right. So there's this like respect for listening. For some mornings, it's fine and I can just go into it. But some mornings I need a little time to work into it. And I think that just that relationship, that's one example, but what is it that I need and want, and to really listen to your body. And this is where this body personality that I've made up, it's sort of like, oh, you're really listening. Oh, okay, now I'm going to talk to you. Like now I'm really going to talk to you. And I have 2 cats, but one cat, for whatever reason, early on, I posed him a question, what do you want, buddy? And he will vocalize at me, like he tells me everything that's going on for him, because I'm listening. Like I set up a regular, what is it you need? And he tells me. And so I feel like our body can work that way. It becomes an ally that you have intelligent conversations with about not just what do I do, but how do I do it? How often, how long? And to really acknowledge that today it might be a 20-minute run, because my knees really today are not into doing more. Yeah. And sort of, rather than taking that as, oh, I'm getting old and I'm failing, it's that you're honoring, what needs do you have today and what have they done? Maybe you spent the weekend in the garden or hiking or whatever, and they just need a little more rest. Right. Yeah.
I really love the word that you used, respect. And that just jumped out to me. And it just has me thinking, I like to use myself as an example, but it just has me really thinking about how often in my fitness pursuits, I was not respectful to my body, and I was doing the fitness out of almost punishment and not out of respect. And the difference and the shift that needs to happen for that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, there's hearkening back to Olivia Newton-John. Very much fitness was an outside in kind of proposition, that it's important to look a certain way. And that's a main goal. And there's nothing wrong with that goal at all, but it leaves the interior out sort of alone. And it also, I think, in the kind of society we live in, and this is something coming from my Feldenkrais work, we're very shaped by our culture and society and families, literally at our movement habits, and this shaping that treats ourselves as some kind of machine because we've lived in such an industrial productivity, like commodity driven kind of culture and society, at least in North America, that we include our bodies as that rather than an organic, living, intelligent, changeable, adaptable living being that has a wholeness. We tend to commodify the knee. If the knee hurts, then we have to focus on the knee. And my work sort of says it's probably has a lot to do with how you're placing your foot and what's happening in your hip joint, and probably even how you're holding your head that impacts the forces traveling through your knee. And so looking at people as a whole picture is important, but we've internalized that. And it was really, I'm just about finished a 4-year Feldenkrais practitioner program, and there's a touch-based component. And the main principle is that you're touching a human, and if possible, inviting them back into wholeness through this touch. And then I started to get really conscious of how many times I got touched by other people, but touched like an object. And it was a little bit, when you go through deeper learning cycles, it was a bit painful to realize many people around me touched me like a thing, not a person. And it's not they're not bad people, it's not malicious, but it's this held assumption that shows up literally in how you touch someone. So my trainers would often say, how would you touch a baby? What, you do not touch a baby like an object, you touch it like this precious human being.
Right.
And can we touch ourselves that way? Can we move ourselves that way?
Yeah, what a wonderful reminder of how we treat ourselves, really. I think of, unfortunately, the horrible things I've said to myself or treated myself. I would never do that to someone else. And yet I very freely say horrible things and punish. And yeah,
exactly. Having worked through that cycle myself, decided to name my inner critic voice a nickname. So it's Sweet Pea. If I could do a really good Georgian accent, it would be like Sweet Pea,
Oh, Sweet Pea. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when the voice shows up, it's like fighting it seemed to make it stronger. So it was a way to, oh, Sweet Pea. What do you say it to me now?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I was looking at your website. First of all, there's a photo of you with a sword. And I'm like, all right, this woman's a badass. So, but what was really interesting to me was it was beside this paragraph where you were talking about peace being powerful. And I wonder if you can add more to that. First of all, we are recording this during a time, I'm hoping by the time this airs, that this is over and we have a positive outcome. But right now, Russia has invaded Ukraine and it's heartbreaking. And it's just a good reminder of the violence and the mindset that is in the world well, I was going to say today, but since the dawn of time, probably, unfortunately. And another reminder why I think women should be in leadership roles, but there you go. But anyway, not to make light of it, but yeah, so this is a reality right now. And I'm hoping, like I said, when this airs, that we are not still in this horrible reality. But I'm wondering how you, just that take on that, how peace can be powerful.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, preparing for this, thinking, wow, there's this incredible larger environment that we're having this conversation in. And I'll start in the outside and then come back in. When people come to a place where they can value other people as they value themselves, when they want to focus on things like love and empathy and compassion, and all of that's beautiful, right? Like it's what we desire, right? A kinder society, a civil society where we actually care for each other. It's not very powerful, right? It kind of needs everybody to be nice to work, and that's not the world we live in. And so there's coming back to the inside, there's this phenomenon that can happen. It happens in other traditions as well, but I find in Aikido, increasingly you develop this kind of internal core that's calm, it's settled, it's clear, almost empty, right? So all of the, we talked about inner critics or other kinds of internal things, they sort of fall away and you're just present. And there's also this weird kind of, the word I want to say is invulnerability. And I don't mean that someone couldn't attack you or even you hurt or kill you from that, but from that knowing it is like that doesn't matter. And there can be a physical structural strength with this. And so I'll just share a little story that we do drills often to help develop. One of the words for this is an Aikido body. So this Aikido really means love and presence, where you're cohesive, you're complete, and you're structurally sound. Your skeleton, your muscles are well aligned. And so we'll do drills where you kind of put on this Aikido body and then someone pushes you. And we always work gradually, but eventually the pressure is enough that it can be quite impactful. And so I remember doing this a couple of years ago with a partner, guy bigger than me. And apparently I was finding it, and really just, it just feels like you're kind of hanging out and whole and full, and it doesn't really feel like much of anything. And I said, are you pushing? Are you kind of playing with me? And he said, well, stop whatever you're doing and I'll push you as hard as I'm pushing you. And so I stopped, so I stopped, and he literally pushed, like his push, I went 6 feet into the wall,
wow.
right? He was applying a lot of force. I couldn't tell, right? Because I was connected in myself and with the earth. And so to me, it's just an extension of what we all have. It's not a special ability. It's something everyone can cultivate. When you feel and you kind of abide from there more regularly, it changes how you connect with others. It changes what's worth fighting for. There's so many of what I would call the smaller ego-based pieces that just don't matter because they don't land. There's no opening for it to come in and wound, even if it's targeted right at you. And even if it's meant to hurt you, it doesn't have to. And so there's this kind of solidity of this way of being, and it's entirely portable. You don't have to be in any kind of special place to do it. And so I really got to put that to test. I had a gig a couple of years ago with an online embodiment conference. And at the end of the day, there was 500,000 people registered for the conference. So it was a truly global situation. And as we led up to it, the George Floyd situation happened, like that tragedy happened in the US. And I was doing diversity inclusion work for it. And I received the most heat I've ever experienced. The social activism and social media and all of the worst of what people can do showed up and targeted. People were wounded, they were hurt, they were angry, and we were a good target. And so the commitment I made to act from that place was to treat everyone as human and to ask the question, because I had some really difficult conversations. People accused speakers that were hired to speak of all sorts of wrongs, and lots of trauma and lots of anger and hurt were laid on that stage, is to say, how can we be human together? We may not agree at all. We may not find a resolution, but I'm here and I need us to stay human as we do this. I don't know how to do that, but that's my intention. And so tremendously difficult. And it was just it was a really hot time as our current situation, right? It's a really difficult time. And there's people fighting because they feel they have to, with the incursion, and listening to some of the Russian perspectives, they feel they have to too. And so we can vilify them, and maybe with some cause, but they are also acting from a need. And you can argue that it's trumped up or it's not legitimate, but it's so easy to make them non-human, to say that Putin and the Russians are non-human. I think about the Russian soldiers who probably are like, what are we doing
What are we
here?
doing? Yeah, exactly.
And who could have family. Like this is not a far war. This is a near war.
Mm.
And so it's that harder question in a way to say, how can I be strong enough that even as wrongs are happening, and even to me, that I can include the other person as human and that they're acting from some need.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I particularly feel for women, there's a real challenge in the generosity of wanting to care and nurture, is there also needs to be boundaries and self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
As part of that, when we take it off of the larger stage and into the personal. And that's what I find often. I'm working in some kind of way with boundaries with women because they've accepted the role, accepted
Mm-hmm.
in their family, at work, and in their community, that in some way people are allowed to step over them, to walk over them, and to come back to a healthier, like, this is my space,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm willing to offer you this, but you're not going to come and take the rest of that. Some women, unfortunately, are faced with real survival, real self-protection issues. Often it's more like energy,
Mm-hmm.
either the work of the home or the work in the community, all the unpaid caring work, is the presumption that you're a machine and
Right.
that you just can provide it. I press a button and you show up and do the mom thing, or you do. And to allow that, in fact, we're all human. And sometimes that means reclaiming your space,
Mm-hmm.
as we see the Ukrainian people are saying, actually, this is our country.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. It is a lot. And thank you for naming the difficult piece, right? Like, we always want to have a villain. I have always thought that war would be better handled with the leaders playing a chess game,
Yeah.
not involving the everyday people like you and me, who are just going about their life and wanting to have a good life for themselves and their families.
Mhm.
And so it's important to remember, because I do have fear about that. I feel like I'm getting off topic. I'm looking at the time, so I'm sorry, but I do have fear that we will villainize, because it's happened before. We started our conversation, you sharing about the Japanese internment camps, how we can villainize a whole based on just a few. And we have to be very careful of that.
Yeah. It's so easy when someone shows up and they're different in demonstrable ways. Skin color is an easy one. Sexual orientation, assumptions about how resources should be used and allocated. Like, there's innumerable differences that come both culturally, but through all sorts of religious beliefs, other beliefs, lots of beliefs about power, who gets to set the rules. So there's lots to negotiate through. You need to be strong in who you are and to be able to step in that space so that you don't require correcting someone of their worldview simply because they're different. And I have to say, I see a lot of, in the social justice world now, that kind of idea is that people are misinformed if they don't agree with me. And so I'm going to educate them. And if they don't agree with me still, well, there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's some sort of thing that, and then ultimately there's some kind of evil if they don't agree. And it really doesn't allow much space for people to bring their legitimate worldviews and how their experience and their upbringing has told them this is my world. And so I really try to hold that up front, is to say, when I meet a new person, they have a world that works in the way it does for them. We may live in the same society, but we don't live in the same world. And to try to understand that doesn't mean giving up my world. And that's always a danger, that you collapse your own as you connect. And so this is why I find the body-based work so important, to help reground that if you find you're needing to somehow overlay your view on, but I'm really right, is to pull yourself back. Or when you find somebody was really imposing, is to say, I actually don't see the truth in what you're saying, and I'm going to reground back in how I am. And of course, the worst, I was so touched seeing a couple of days ago the International Women's Day and the picture of the Ukrainian women in arms who had taken their children to safety and come back to fight.
Yeah.
It's not, even though it's true, not only do I have a sword, I have 3 swords right now and other weapons, but I have no desire to go and be violent, and it is to say, the capability, the ability to be able to use force well. I think we've lost that in our concern for the love and compassion and peace. And, my greatest teachers, including my current Aikido teacher, Brad Schultz, he doesn't see those as polarities, is that you can hold, incredible compassion and love for someone, and you can take care of yourself. And in fact, you can be stronger in what you can offer out because you can take care of yourself.
Ooh, I think we should have a deeper conversation on that. I think that's important. Yeah. We'll do that again. Okay. We'll do that again. Good. Well, Cheryl, I really want to thank you. I have one more question, but for listeners, I just wanted to say there will be links in the show notes. But Cheryl is she does have some free online workshops each month. There'll be a link to that. And then you are offering 5 free online discovery sessions. And so there will be a link to that to schedule. And so, Cheryl, my last question I have for you is, what advice would you give women in these middle years as they think about reclaiming midlife in general, but also reclaiming their fitness and their health?
Yeah, I think it's really important to pay attention to what you would call your comfort zone and what you would call your challenge zone. Because one of the things I see that increases the burden of aging for women is when they more and more retreat to their comfort zone. And they don't, at the most basic level, they don't challenge their sense of balance. They don't challenge their stamina. When that starts to become more and more true, it feels like they're practicing for old age. Wow. And I have dear friends and even family members that I see them, they're already incapable in certain ways that I find shocking at early mid-50s. So it's really important to step into your challenge zone, whatever that means. I believe in a certain basic level of fitness, and there's just a study came out not just a couple of weeks ago that looked at, we can do a certain kind of movement, and it's called eccentric movement. So if I'm doing a bicep curl, I'm contracting the muscle, but if I'm lengthening the muscle and putting force through it or weight on it, it's an eccentric contraction. That we can do that for as little as, like, I think they said something like 30 seconds to a minute a day.
Wow.
And in their research, they saw up to a 12% increase in strength and other indicators.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I was like, what? I've been doing all this. So the ability to put demand on ourselves physically, the bar's pretty low. I think the bar is pretty low. We need to do it. And I'm a big believer in found exercise. So it's the things like a little bit how many steps, but can I actually lift things? But as I say that, it's important to listen to yourself as you step into that challenge zone. And I sort of say, when I'm feeling particularly creaky and cranky, it's a sign I need more support, not to stop. And so look for the extra layer of magnesium salts in the bathroom, in the bathtub, or some other little layer of nutritional support, or so that I can go through that kind of creaky, cranky place and then keep going with something. Because I do find there's just we start to fade, like, I don't want to have to feel, I don't want to get sweaty. I don't want to mess my hair, or whatever the excuse is. I don't want to go into a place where I might feel discomfort and pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying go and like burn yourself out,
Right.
but without, like, we're literally designed, our body will literally remake its tissues based on demand. So it is a kind of, if you don't use it, we're in an age where we really can start to lose it. We can reclaim it, but there's more and more work that happens as we age. So better to keep going, right? Better to keep some kind of challenge in front of you in some sort of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So Cheryl, I just really want to thank you again for being on the podcast. It was great getting to know you, and I can't wait to learn more about what you do. And I think I may check out some free online workshops just to see, because I know that I'm in that creaky, cranky place quite a bit.
Yeah.
So thanks again.